NIA Center for the Arts promotes, showcases, and supports the arts from across the African diaspora. As part of NIA Center's work, we're proud to showcase to you a series of artist conversations as part of our Left of Center program. Left of Center is a 2-year artist incubator that supports the careers of emerging Black artists working across a wide range of disciplines. And as part of the Left of Center program, you're here to listen to a series of artist conversations from folks like Sarah Black, Kevin Ray, and more. These conversations are meant to support emerging artists in propelling their careers forward from everything from grant writing, developing artist statements, and empowering yourself as a Black creative in this city. Stay tuned for more, and if you have any questions, you can always email NIA Center at info@niacenter.org, or you can follow us online at NIA Center as well across Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thanks so much and enjoy. So we're here with Imad, Elsheikh, and Sara Elgamal, and we're talking about ways that emerging artists and creative producers can create workflows, systems, and just ultimately be, productive creative entrepreneurs. And so let's start with you, Imad, with you introducing yourself. Tell us a little bit about you, and tell us about yourself.
My name is Imad. I'm a executive producer of my own production studio called PIQUE, and we create branded content, commercials, music videos, documentaries, short films, and I've worked with clients like CBC, Adidas, Novus, Nia, Old Spice, Red Bull, and so on. Nice. Locally and internationally. Cool. And all the projects we work on are very diverse and community-driven.
Amazing.
Production.
Cool. Thank you for being here. And Sara, introduce yourself for us and our audience members at home.
My name is Sara Elgamal. I'm a filmmaker and traditionally more of a freelance producer. I've produced globally in many different countries and mostly in music videos, short films, documentaries, and branded content. And most recently, I directed a campaign for the UN called A Piece of Me, which came out last year.
Amazing. Thanks for being here to you both. When you're working with, your peers, people who are close to you, who you've maybe worked with previously in the past, it can be really awkward to bring in words like agreement and contract, and maybe something started off like super small, like an idea you had, and now you're looking to formalizing it. As emerging artists and creatives, what's a way that they can, effectively do that, where they can create a contract that they know will keep them and their project safe, but that also won't maybe ruin the relationship, tarnish the relationship, and bring in feelings that didn't exist there before?
Yeah, I would say if it's an awkward situation to maybe bring up a contract right away with someone you're working with, I would always, the rule of thumb is just start with the email. Yeah. Always bring a conversation to an email. And maybe just work through all the details in the email. And once you've had enough of that information, you can then sort of put it all together into a contract and just really casually say, hey, I organize all of our ideas into this contract. Does it look good to you? And if so, just sign it and send it back. Yep. And I think it's important to do so because a lot of times, even when you think a project is just something small or casual, you never know that it could get picked up by a film festival. It could end up getting distribution. So you want to make sure that you very clearly outline what every role is, who's doing what, who owns what, who's contributing what, and and sometimes that even goes down to I'm going to be providing the treatment and the video. I'll have a hard drive. It doesn't matter, whatever it is, you want to outline it just so it avoids more awkwardness down the line when you guys get that $1 million deal and it's who owns this? Yeah. What role do I have here? So I think sometimes just start with an email. I think that's the most easy, painless way that you can do it. And a lot of times that is legally binding and contractual. So even if, worst case, you don't get that signed contract, at least you can go back to your email thread and say, no, this is how much you said you would charge. This is what you said you would do. So there's no there's no gray areas. You want to avoid as many gray areas as possible.
Nice. It could be awkward in the beginning, but it saves you from further awkwardness or more intense awkwardness when your film gets picked up by Netflix and you can't remember, oh wait, you were a big part of this project, then you should be into that conversation.
You can always just lie to and say, hey, hey, they need this contract for the grant, so I just need you to sign it.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. And I think you mentioned before, using words like sign, you don't really need to have someone sign something, but just agree or oh hey, take a look at this and let me know how you feel about it. Just because again, those words can be difficult for some people. It's good to practice using those words like sign, contract, agreement, etc. But sometimes you just need someone to look at it and be like, yeah, that looks good. I agree.
Yeah.
Cool. What about you, Imad, when you're working in community or working with teams, whether with PIQUE or not with PIQUE? What is this process of like usage agreements, contracts, loan agreements? What does that look like for you and your team?
Yeah. So like every contract's different. It depends on who you're working with and what type of art they're doing, or whether it's a contract with like a client, like a brand, or so everything is different. And I think, like Sara mentioned, like stuff like outlining all the things that you would usually see in an agreement, like what your cost or your fee, your like the date, and like what the term is, where it's.
When you say term, what do you mean by term?
Sorry, like term as in like, okay, we're signing a contract and it's from this date until the final delivery date, which is 4 months from now.
Cool.
So show those terms, and then and there's a lot of again, it depends on the type of contract. So those are the types of things that I feel like are consistent. Plus, like if the brand wants you to be like keep it confidential, or if it's like exclusive and you can only work with this company or this brand for X amount of times, like that's also something to consider. Or like dates and delivery dates and stuff like that. I feel like this is all
deliverables for sure. What are you even being required to give? In what format? When? Things like that.
I was going to add that a really popular one is like an artist agreement. Which outlines usually if you're using someone's like music or artwork, and that just sort of outlines exactly how it's being used, where it's being used, and for how long, and if it's only online or if it's being shown on TV or if it's being shown globally or just in Toronto. That's really important, and that's often how people sue you. So that's a really good thing to just get out of the way. And just make sure that you really have a permission to use people's work.
Yeah, definitely.
And templates are available online, so you can always look online and find something that can work for you, and ask people too.
Definitely.
Like, don't be shy, because that's how I did it. Pretty sure how Sara did it. Like, you just ask for people for help. Definitely. And also like invest in a lawyer if it makes sense. If lawyers are always down to help you out grow and so on. So it might be annoying to put that money in at the beginning and invest in it, but it's worth it, because there's contracts that I used that I asked for years ago, and kind of built off that, or went back to the lawyer and made tweaks to it, so it didn't cost like a fortune. And again, it's an investment, so definitely it's important to keep in touch with them.
Sure. Yeah, once you move into managing projects, managing other people, you will begin to move into investing in your work, whether that be a lawyer or different software or whatever that may be. And so a lawyer is something that I think is often overlooked, but it could save you down the line. And also you might send that contract to someone and then they use that for another project. So, it's all shared, for sure. Teach one, community learning.
I've definitely had situations in the past where I haven't used anything and it did bite me in the ass. Like, example of a video that I produced on my own when I was starting out in freelance, and put my heart and soul into it, my own money into it and everything, and I didn't sign anything in terms of ownership rights, and basically later on it became a really massive video that had millions of views on YouTube, and to this day I have no legal rights to claim any royalties or anything, because I'm like, I just want to do this for experience, and it ended up being way bigger than I thought it would be. So had I had made that clear, and also it's intimidating, especially as a young woman, to go up to these men in the industry and say, hey, like, what rights do I have? But I'm sure if I had asked someone, in the beginning and made it a contractual thing, I would have been protected. So I just was more like, excited for the opportunity and just went with it. And now, like, I wish I had been a bit more serious about that.
That can be tricky, like major opportunities, and I feel like more and more emerging artists, particularly Black artists, are being called to produce work and sit on events and panels and all these things, and they're bright, shiny, beautiful opportunities, but I think in that we can sometimes get lost in making sure that we protect ourselves and our work, and so having a contract that, again, you just flip to people. I've asked artists to do work, and I've been sent these massive contracts that I have to like pour over for days, but I appreciate it because it lets me know that they're really serious, and I've got to be serious about this project as well. So it just kind of sets us all off on a great start.
Yeah, and I feel like if you feel like something's off, like you feel like, you're putting in a lot, or you feel uncomfortable that someone's using your work for this film, and like, shouldn't I be getting paid more? Like, yeah, that's when you're probably right, and you probably need a contract, and you probably should speak to someone, you know, and yeah, like Imad said, like a lot of times lawyers can just give you like advice without necessarily spending hours on it. So you could just say, hey, like, found this contract online, does that look applicable to this? And maybe they can even just guide you and say, no, you know, that's only for Americans, or like that's whatever, or whatever the case may be. But you might as well
point you in the
try.
right direction and steer you.
Yeah, exactly.
For sure. So just to reiterate, like the building blocks, so we've been talking about that a lot today. Building blocks of an invoice, building blocks for a budget, building blocks for a contract to look like what? Roles and responsibilities, terms, what are other these like Lego blocks that we can use to create strong contracts?
So yeah, so I'd say the name, the person that you're going into an agreement with, the fees, the dates, deliverables, and there's a bunch of things that if you look up a contract online that are just like clauses or conditions, make sure those are all included. It's, a lot of times it's standard on a lot of contracts. And that's maybe stuff you can talk to with a lawyer, because I'm pretty sure a lawyer, like she said, that's a good point. Like a lawyer will appreciate that you just send them something rather than asking them to draft it all up for you. And then they can just like kind of coach you on a few things here and there.
Definitely.
But yeah, those are all like important things. The term, I think we were talking about usage, how it can be used, how they want the credits to even be shown when you like, if it's your work.
Definitely.
Honestly, to this day, I still use things online. And what I'll do often is I'll look at maybe, like if it's a contract I've never dealt with myself before and I have no idea what it looks like, I'll literally go online and I'll look at like 10 different versions of the same contract, and you start to find similarities. Okay, this clause is always included. And you can start to build it together that way in terms of like what you think is applicable to your project and what isn't. Like it is a lot to read, but it also, when you really break it down, like you'll figure it out, you know, like it's in English at the end of the day, so just like read it, figure it out.
Legalese may not be English, but you know.
Try your best, and if you don't know a word, just Google it, and it takes time, but once you do it right the first time, like Imad said, you can use it over and over and over again.
It's part of the work too, right? Like a lot of, I think creativity seems so glamorous, but behind the scenes, it's a lot of poring over budgets and contracts and building things that work for you. And just like quickly for those watching, when we talk about these clauses, what are some common clauses? Like I know we typically have like cancellation clauses with COVID, there's clauses on like pandemic considerations. What are some clauses that you include in your contracts that are just like standard? All of my contracts have a this clause or a that clause.
Yeah, I mean, cancellation one is important. Again, it really depends on
the project.
It's like there's conditions that or clauses that you'll put in and out. But yeah, like there could be, again, I think confidentiality is a big one. So that like if you're working with us on something, it has to be kept private. Things like who owns IP, like
which is intellectual property?
Yes, intellectual property, sorry. So,
no worries.
If it's like, who owns it? Like the director? Is it the brand that owns it? Is it the production studio? Like, that's all to be discussed. Cool. Those are really important clauses that I can think of right now. I
think, and also just like, I think for if you're getting commissioned to do work or something, I think those ones you have to be careful about when you're dealing with a client, because a lot of times they'll ask for things which might seem standard for them, but might be a lot of work for you. Like, for example, they might say, like, we want a hard drive of all your raw footage or something. And you just, like, look over that, and that's something that you might be like, no, I don't want to do that, you know? So you have to really look at those fine lines in contracts. And I think, like, other main things are, kind of went through it. Like, dates are really important. Like, when... Like, I always make sure I make it very clear that, you know, the client wanted the first draft by then and this by then. Like, you know, you want to outline that in contracts.
And then payment terms as well.
Payment terms, so
know when you're going to get your first deposit, second, third, fourth, and so on. Be clear on when you should get it, and, like,
definitely
point the deliverables, like if you get the last payment when the last piece is delivered. So you can break it up. And be firm on those contracts too, because there's times, even now, like there's times when I'll have a contract and I'm still getting like payments late. So like use use those against you. I mean, don't like go everywhere flashing contracts. Like, that's a little extreme, but just be like firm on it.
It's there for a reason, right?
Yeah. It's there for a reason. Yeah.
Especially if you've invested so much time and money into making a contract, you'll want to enforce it, right? Because I mean, there's a point, but the larger point is to make sure that you have something that you can like put teeth behind. And teeth sounds kind of aggressive, but you know, that you can enforce when you need to.
Yeah, you need it.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've talked about budgets and all of these things that can be really difficult to manage. And so I think the number one question I think people might be having is, how do I organize all of this? And we talked a little bit about file names and organizing things, but just in general as creatives, how do you stay organized? How do you stay on top of things? Whether it's your first big project or many small projects that you have on the go, and keeping, you know, the emerging creative in mind, what are some ways that you would recommend that they can just generally stay organized?
I would say, like, for me, the way I organize my stuff is I integrate a lot of it into, and everyone's different. This is just how I do it. It's not the right way. Okay, like, but I'll use like, I have an iPhone, I'll just use the calendar, and I'll like tie in all my Gmail calendar, personal calendars, like family and anything. Like, I tie it all into one place.
Nice.
And I'll use that as like, when I have meetings or phone calls or like the gym or I have to go with friends and hang out somewhere, like everything's on there so that, and then I share those calendars with people so that they can also see it.
That's so good to hear. I'm like, am I the only one? I'm like super type A and everything lives on my Google calendar, and I'll invite my mom, I'll send her calendar invites for dinner, but I'm like, I need you to accept it because I don't know if you're coming if you don't.
You need to know.
Yeah.
So it's important. So like that, it's a gift and a curse, I guess, because I also stare at my phone a lot.
Yes.
But everything is there, and I feel like I won't use as much like brain power because it's all there, and like I don't have to like stress about it too much.
Definitely.
So I use the reminders from my phone or calendar to like, remind me of things, and I'll put a lot of information in any of the things I create, or what are they called? Invitations or whatever. I'll create them in there, and I'll put links in there. I'll put information in there.
Definitely.
So that I just have details of what I need to do.
Nice, yeah.
And I always just move them to different dates, or I like, if I didn't have time today, I'll move it to the next day. So that I'm just kind of always keeping track of everything.
Nice. I feel like you may be the complete opposite, but tell us about how you stay organized. And essentially, the point of this is to figure out how you created this system and how you created this workflow. So I think you put a lot of work into your phone and making sure that all your apps kind of talk to each other, but I'm curious to know how you do this on your end.
Yeah, my system's a little terrifying in that, no, mine is like, the way I think or operate is like, a lot of times I also have like multiple jobs and things on the go, and my brain can be like really scattered. And so my thing is I usually have a to-do list every day that I write out on a notebook. And it's just kind of like, I just go through it in my head and I just say like, okay, like this project, and I list everything that needs to be done. And I mean like everything, like literally like email this person, like book this camera. I just write a list, and it could be like 3 pages for one day of to-do list, but just every detail is in there. And it's more so me, it's not just so much for me to remember, it's also for me to work it out in my head. Like, I'm a very sort of visual thinker, and a lot of times to get things out of my head and process them, I need to like put them on paper first. And then as the day goes, I also find it extremely satisfying to cross things off a to-do list. Like, I don't know, that's like, there's a science to that, but like, there's nothing like crossing it off on a real piece of paper with a pen and being like, great. The tedious thing is obviously then having to add it to the next day if you don't get it done. But all of my obviously like Zoom calls and meetings are all on my Google Calendar. Obviously that's the best way to communicate with people and save things. But yeah, it's a little bit mad, but that's how I work, and it's been kind of successful for the last 10 years. So.
The hardest part is finding something that works for you, right?
Exactly.
So if it works, truly.
It works, and like stick to it. Like,
Yeah. Sure. Or like flex it, you know, like you may need to not stick to it, or like you may need to change things up. Maybe the people you're working with like are all obsessed with like Google Calendar. Maybe you need to like transition for a little bit.
Sure, and I know I can't speak on the names, but I know a lot of creatives use like software or certain apps that like organizes their whole life. Like I actually will like plug things in, and my issue is I forget to look at apps. You know, but if I always have this notebook on in my backpack or something, like it's there.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah.
I've fallen in love with Notion. It's like this app for like taking like notes or whatever, but it's like, but no one else uses it. So I'm just like in this like community of one where I'm just like on Notion all the time and everyone's like, I just wrote it down on Google Calendar.
Yeah.
So yeah, once you find something for you that works, that's amazing.
Yeah.
The last part of our conversation is just on managing people. It's like, I think one of the most nuanced and hardest things to do, especially when you're emerging and you're creating your own project for the first time. There's people who you know, who you don't know, there's expectations. Just generally, when it comes to like interpersonal relationships, how do you manage that when you have a project where, you know, you are responsible for the success of it, particularly on the like the human side?
I always say that the best managers, or the best way to manage people, is by understanding their roles. And so I think to be the best manager, you need to ask a lot of questions. You know, how does this work? Why do you need this camera? You know, explain it to me, like literally learn. And like, yeah, I think I was blessed, like coming up in terms of starting from the bottom, as I literally had to do a lot of these different roles, and I had to like understand and you know, and yeah, I think that's the best way to manage, because you're not just sort of, when you're trying to say control a set or tell everyone to be there at a certain time, you need to know that makes sense for everybody, and that you've taken the time to understand what everyone needs before you can start controlling people, you know, because I think that way you gain more respect, you know. You've been able to to really try to learn about all the different roles, try to learn about people's characters, and then in doing so, you get a lot more respect in being like, I said we need to be there for 6 a.m., you know, like and then they'll be like, okay, you know, because we get it. That's my first thing, I think. I have this big policy of not working with assholes.
It's a good policy.
It is, and I find that, you know, you could have the most talented person in the world, but if they do not have a good personality in terms of vibing with other people, and clients, or how to, you know, present themselves to client. Like, I don't care if you're the best. I'd rather have someone who's like 80%, but is passionate and is willing to put in the work and to like communicate.
And not be an asshole.
Exactly. And also, like, I think personally, I come from the mindset as a producer of, I always try to book people who are the best for the job, not just people I like, not just my friends or people I like or people I tend to always work with. I always think, okay, like, how does this person's talent or personality like apply to this particular job? And I find that when you do so, it's a lot easier to manage people, because they all want to be there, and they all, like, you know, like they all really mesh with the project. So yeah, it's just easier to deal with different personalities that way.
Nice. When you were more early stages in your career in managing people, what were some of the challenges that you faced?
Yeah, I mean, like, some of the scariest situations I've been in as a producer are just being put into projects where, like, I didn't, like, I've, you know, for example, dealt with directors in Hollywood who are big assholes, and are really just like, you need to get them what they need, and that's it. Or I've produced things in, like, Morocco. We were dealing with the production team of a bunch of men who are just screaming at you all day. And I think in those situations, like, the part about being knowledgeable is what saves you in the end. Do you know what I mean? Is like being like, no, that doesn't make sense because this, and this. So
particularly
just like,
if a woman in
asking questions and just knowing your shit will help you in terms of managing people. I think no matter what environment you're in, is just being able to say, actually, I thought you need this for that camera, or, you know, I actually called the rental house and that's not true, or, you know, so that kind of allows you to just have the upper hand in dealing with personalities, I think.
Nice. What about you, Imad? I know with PIQUE, I'm sure there's so many people you work with.
Yeah. So I guess it's like a good perspective, because you've directed and produced. So when you're producing, you kind of control a little bit more of the team. When you're directing, it's like you don't know who you might run into, right? But like a lot of times, like, I'll produce, like I don't really direct. So majority of the time, like, I'll tend to control the production crew and like at least be involved in this, or have a say with the director, or whoever it is I'm working with, or the brand. But good energy is what I always look for at the end of the day on a crew. Like, and I always want to make sure, even if it's like, whether it's like someone's grip or PA or the director, I want to like know what their goals are.
Yeah, nice.
I want to do this like long term, because I don't really want anyone on set to be there just because they're trying to get paid, or they're like, they don't really know what they want to do, and it's okay to not know what you want to do, but like work towards something. 'Cause then you'll know everyone's like it'll just be like good energy on set, and everyone's like trying to strive to be something better.
It makes what's happening more meaningful.
Yeah, and it makes the project more meaningful as well. So that's like one big thing for me, is like knowing who those people are, having those conversations.
Nice.
And I try to have conversations with people like that are outside of work sometimes, just to kind of like break the ice and not always make it feel like so like super like worky.
Yeah, we only exist in this one professional relationship.
So I kind of like that energy as well, just because I still want it to be a fun thing at the end of the day. I don't want it to be like stress, like, you know, there's jobs that are stress, but it's fun stress sometimes, you know? I don't even know if that's a phrase. Fun stress. But like, this is tough, but like you like it.
Nice.
So that's important. And I feel like I've kind of built myself around that kind of system or energy, and it's worked well for me. So I like to kind of keep that going. Yeah. And then the times when you'll work on a production and there's that one person or that few people that are just, they're off and like they don't seem like they're on that same wavelength, you'll notice it like right away.
Interesting. And what do you do to address
have that conversation with that person, be like, is this really what you want to do? Or is everything okay today? Like, it's like, you know, you're having like sometimes shit happens, like people have bad days too.
Definitely.
I haven't seen it all, but I've seen like some of those situations, and like a lot of times you just gotta have a convo with them and just cool it down and like go to their level. And another thing is I also like to not, if I'm like producing or exec producing or like whatever it is, like I always try to like get my hands dirty and do stuff on set, just so it doesn't seem like I'm just in the shadows or I'm not around. Yeah, you're like Big Brother, just like hanging around. Yeah, not even close. Like I think it makes me feel comfortable with the team and vice versa. Definitely. And like everybody, it's like a win-win for everybody. It's like it's good energy.
Yeah, I think you're just saying like, how do you deal with that? I think a lot of times when you have personalities on set who might be like unhappy, a lot of times it is that sort of lack of communication. I find like maybe your grip or gaffer, like, you know, didn't know that there would be overtime or something, or so that's why I think communication is really key, and having that relationship with every single person that you're hiring on is like really important. I have had one time in my career where I actually had to kick someone off set because their attitude was so shit, and it's crazy. It was like, we thought one of the most important, it was actually a crane operator, and we were all terrified, and honestly, it was the best thing to let the person go. And you never know, like sometimes the attitude makes such a difference that as soon as he was gone, we came up with a completely new idea, and it ended up being more beautiful than we could have anticipated. Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So sometimes if that's what you really, really need to do, then you do it. But you try to avoid that with just constant communication and making sure everyone's happy.
Nice. My last question is just, what advice do you have for emerging creatives who are stepping into that leadership role for the first time? It's the first time where they're now responsible for others. They're now responsible for a production or creative pursuit as a curator. What advice would you give to them to help them, you know, feel confident and empowered to do so?
I would say don't be afraid to ask someone more experienced than you in that role. If you're doing things the right way, if you need to borrow a template, if you're asking for the right, you know, does this budget look okay? You know, the budget range look okay before I get into a project? I find that if it's these very like quick, important questions, like no one will ever sort of turn you away from that. And I think I couldn't have done it myself, just sort of, you know, as a freelance producer, because I was in so many different situations along the way that I always had to like, you know, just consult with people who are more experienced than me, just to make sure I was like going in the right direction. I think that's a really big one. And like I said, just learn as much as you can about, especially as like a producer, if that's what you're looking to do, just learn as much as you can about things, you know, like it's not just, sometimes it is that annoying thing, you know, of looking at understanding contracts, of, you know, understanding what is on an equipment list and why it's there, you know, what does this cord mean? Like, what is this, why do we need 3 monitors? You know, like, you don't just leave that up to, you know, each person. You try to understand so that, you know, you look experienced and, you know, you are experienced, you gain experience, and the next time around you're like, you know, you're able to just jump right in and do it without having to ask so many questions. So
nice, amazing, super helpful.
Basically, echoing that, like, ask for advice from other people that you know that are like leaders. And like, I've also realized that like when I I didn't do film my whole life, but I thought about, not everyone loves their boss, but if you have a boss that you did like think about what they did and what you liked about them.
Yeah.
Because you can apply that to like what you do, and that's what I've done in the past.
Nice.
So like, and it could be like your McDonald's boss, it could be like Future
For sure. Shout out to Future Shop.
That's why it probably dates me, no matter. But like, like them, or if you work at a
My way.
like government office, wherever it was, like the leaders still the same in different industries.
Definitely.
So like take note of the ones that you liked and like apply that to
Emulating behavior.
Yeah.
Nice.
So that's important for me.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. Unless you have something else to add, I feel like I just cut you off.
No, I was honestly just thinking when you said favorite bosses, I remember I had a producer boss of mine when I was an assistant, and she would just have like 20 jobs on the go and massive, massive commercials, and she had like not one sweat. Like she had 3 kids. She had like, she was our top producer, and amazing. I think back and I still don't know how she did it, but yeah. There are some real OGs out there.
Shout out to the OGs, watching, emulating, and like just reaching out to them, which can seem daunting, but like I know you folks are super approachable. So for those watching, like I mean, if you do want to reach out to Sara or Imad, you know, their info will certainly be in the description, and there's a lot of knowledge here between them both and individually. So feel free to always reach out. Thank you so much for being here. I know it's, you know, an odd time of the day, it's an odd time of the year in the world, but I'm really sure that, you know, folks watching will be able to take some of the stuff that you shared and readily apply that to their practices. So shout out to you both, and thank you. You're welcome.